Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Securing Your Business webinar series. We are thrilled that you are here today, be it on Zoom, watching this live, on Facebook Live, or watching this on one of the several ways to watch on demand at a later time. So welcome, and thank you for being here. If you've been on our previous webinars, you know we like to kick off with an opportunity for you to connect with each other and to say hi in the chat box. You're welcome to introduce yourself. If you're associated with a business, say what business you are with in the chat box now. And you can find the chat at the bottom of your screen if you're on Zoom by hovering over the banner and clicking on chat. When you write in the chat box, be sure that the to field states all panelists and attendees so everyone on the call can see who you are and what business you're associated with. We do have a full house today, so we are going to give it another minute or two while we have more participants joining. We also have several people watching on Facebook Live today. I will share with you that at this point, as you can tell, you're on mute, but we will have an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end of this interview if time allows. Please hold your questions to the end of the presentation and be ready to ask them in the Q&A button on the bottom of your Zoom screen or in the comments on Facebook. So more information on that if and when we're ready to have question and answer time. Thank you so much to those that are currently introducing themselves in the chat. We hope you will take a look and see your community members that are here on this call and use this as a little mini virtual networking opportunity. All right, we got lots of people writing in. Thank you and welcome. And with that, I think we're just about ready to get started. I'd like to introduce President and CEO of the Winter Park Chamber of Commerce, Betsy Gardner-Eckford.
Amy, thank you. And I want to thank our whole team at the Chamber for making this webinar series possible. As you may know, we're doing these every day, Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. And our team is working really hard behind the scenes. It takes an awful lot of work to put an hour of content together. So I'm really grateful to Amy Morgan and Tiffany Cahill and our communications team for getting all this put together today. Our mission at the Chamber is to convene people and ideas for the benefit of our businesses and our community. And it's a privilege to be able to continue to deliver on that mission promise while we're at a stay-at-home order. And so we've been able to cover topics ranging from an interview with our United States Congresswoman, Stephanie Murphy. We've had people from county government in, local business owners with creative ways to pivot their business models during this time. And as I'll go into more later, we're actually having a virtual fashion show in this model tomorrow. So we're thrilled to have you engage with us, and we're delighted to have the privilege of being able to bring the community together during a difficult time and hopefully offer resources ranging from HR to accounting and legal pointers as we move through a very challenging time. So we'll continue to source these experts as we are in our stay-at-home model. So today we are privileged to have the Mayor of Winter Park with us, Mayor Steve Leary. He was originally elected to seat 1 of the Winter Park City Commission in 2011 and then re-elected in 2014. In 2015, he was elected as the 54th Mayor of Winter Park. Mayor Leary, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, thank you, Betsy. I think I'm a day early. The virtual fashion show is tomorrow, right?
Well, I think, you know, it's Winter Park. You can rock that golf look any day of the week. So we're thrilled to have you. So we thought about questions. We got some questions from the community. We thought about the best way to kind of shape what we're going to talk about today is really focus on the COVID-19 sort of crisis, if you will, talk a little bit about the new commission that was elected since the COVID-19 crisis began, and then wrap up a little bit by focusing on through a mirror darkly what opening Winter Park back up might look like. So just to start out, we're aware that the city has generously allocated almost $2 million in resources to assist small businesses and residents as we move through this crisis, including emergency utility assistance, electric fuel rate reduction, small business utility assistance, residential food support through both Feed the Need and the Second Harvest Food Bank, and then also some grants through the Green Business Program. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be and where the commission sort of prioritized these needs?
Yeah, I think, first of all, thanks for having me. I do appreciate it. And thank you, Chamber, for the work you do in pulling these things together. I think they're really important. So we really do appreciate it from a city perspective. Randy and I started speaking about the COVID-19 and early on when this first started, when we first started getting wind of this, and we started discussing actually where we were going to end up rather than immediate responses. We were still waiting on a lot of executive orders. We knew things were going to be coming from Washington. We knew things were going to be coming from the state. We knew things were going to be coming from the county. So rather than preempt and possibly have to change things as we move forward, we just started talking about how and when, what it would look like when we kind of got back to normal. So we kind of got on it fairly early. Early on too, I was, Senator Scott reached out. I've been in constant contact with the mayor's office in Orange County, been in touch with all the Orange County Council of Mayors. So we've been in touch, staying tight with one another. We want to make sure that we're kind of doing things that are similar. We don't want to have challenges when people are going geography to geography about what the rules look like. So initially with the commission, we brought forward, and following some direction and some conversations, Betsy, that the chamber was having, and we reached out to the business community that was obviously hurting, and we wanted to know how we could best assist. So thank you for your leadership on that. You guys were great in bringing kind of to light some of the challenges. Some of the easy fixes for us right away were waiving late fees. That was kind of a quick thing that Randy and his staff said that they could do. They didn't need commission approval for that. So there were not going to be any late fees or any penalties for those that were struggling to pay their utility bills. Then again, that was the next step on there, was to look at utilities and what could we do? Could we defer payments? Could we kind of possibly push things off and allow people to get back on their feet? I would tell you that we got a little bit of pushback from some sectors that the federal government and the state government were working, and even the county government were working on plans for businesses, and some called our actions maybe premature. But as we looked at it, as I looked at it, and I can't speak for our entire commission, but I think it was important for us to react to try to help people get through what we could, to help where we could, while some folks waited on some of those programs from the different forms of government. So as you mentioned, we have the different programs, whether it was the Feed the Need, whether it was the Small Business Utility Assistance Program, whether it was Helping Second Harvest. We have we have contributions to the United Way for their relief. So, we tried to spread it out as best we could. And this, we had the micro loan program. While we originally from the CRA, we received support. I believe it was a 3-2 vote on that, received support, and I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But we did receive support to fund up to $250,000 in micro loans. One of the challenges, and the city commission, the majority did not vote to fund another $250 from the general fund. And as you know, one of the challenges with any micro loan program is the administration of it. Mostly we would, for the most part, we would sign in local business partners, local banks to help us administer. But that has been a challenge as they've been busy with the PPP and some of the other opportunities out there. So it's on hold right now. We have $250,000 allocated, set aside in the CRA. I don't know if we're going to be able to leverage that, quite honestly, just given how it's going to have to be administered, but at least it's a placeholder for now.
Thank you, Mayor. We appreciate the ways that we've been able to work with senior staff and with you to be able to action some of those things early. And I think that was key, to be able to give some indicators to our community as soon as possible, what they could count on. I'm encouraged by the $250,000 that was set aside in a 3-2 vote at the CRA level. Sorry, I think it was 4-2 actually, because Hal George voted for as well. But I'm encouraged by that, and I believe that we see that as a placeholder kind of allocation at the moment, and we're hoping that there may be an appetite for repurposing that allocation going forward. We've heard this whole crisis described as more of a winter rather than a blizzard. And I think for us, we don't quite have a complete understanding of how long small business pain is going to go on for, and what the depth and breadth of that is going to look like as it moves through our entire community. So we're thinking about trying to create solutions that respond both quickly and thoughtfully to the actual needs that we have in our business community. Do you have a sense of whether or not those funds could be redeployed, or what that might look like? Because I think we've reached the place where the micro grant program was really designed to create a speedy solution. And now that people seem to be having federal aid trickling in, there may not be so much of a burning need for that. But we're looking forward to creating other actionable solutions that support our small businesses in Winter Park. Do you have a sense of where we might go forward with that allocation?
Boy, looking around for that crystal ball. I don't. I mean, I may, but I don't think it's fair at this stage, quite honestly. I think we're probably going to be talking and speaking about the new commission and kind of priorities. This is a challenging time. I remember a few years back when Chief Deal came on the scene when he was hired. We were right as he came on. We had the challenge or the tragedy with Roger Trindade, and we also had the hurricane coming on right during Chief Deal's first couple weeks. I think it's just the same thing for the current commission. We have a lot of folks who are trying to feel their way and on the commission level at a pretty unusual time. We don't have that ability to just sit and build that physical camaraderie. So I think that it's really challenging, I think, for the new commission and the new commissioners specifically to get a handle on some of this stuff and what's the best path forward. We've handled emergencies before, mostly natural emergencies. We've had the hurricanes. We kind of know there's usually a start and a stop. There's a midpoint where it's pretty bad, and then we can kind of flow back in. This is creating a little bit of a challenge for us as we look, as I keep telling people, it's not when we open, it's how we open. So, sorry for that long answer to your question. I don't like to do that, but I would say it's going to be I don't have a great sense of it. I'm not sure that money's going to stick around for a grant program. I would like it to. I certainly see the need for it. So, and I think that the CRA, it's one of the reasons the CRA was created, so to help businesses in that sector. So I'm happy to kind of move something forward.
Great. And like I said, we appreciate the political will that got us to that allocation of $250,000 in the CRA. And I think one of the key roles that we've been trying to play is data collection, so that you all can have data-driven decisions as you move forward and really get a sense of what are the pain points in the community. This week, we'll be doing 2 surveys, one of which will be with the Park Avenue merchants to understand what tools could be best actioned to accelerate that sort of recovery, if you will, that reopening phased, although it may be. And then the second one is we are going to release on the exact day that we get guidance from the governor about people's appetite to gather, whether or not they will feel comfortable doing that in June, July, August, September, October. It might be January, we don't know. But we're going to gauge that desire to gather. And then we also are going to ask people to stratify what size group they feel comfortable with. And I think all of us are struggling with what that new normal looks like. If people actually are forced to sit down and think about, do I want to gather in a group bigger than 10, larger than 50? Certainly the art festival we're talking about tens of thousands of people at once. We all have to make decisions about these things. And so it's helpful to us to think about how we gather. Do you have any sense of how people feel about that at the moment?
Well, we had an interesting discussion last night where I believe it was Mr. Weaver at the end of the meeting asked if there was an appetite for mandatory masks to be worn in public in the city. And Park Avenue, Central Park. We went to the city attorney and said, "Is this possible? And if this is possible, do we have support on the commission?" And there was support on the commission. I don't believe we need that, so I was not supportive. Mr. Ciccio asked a question regarding I think that's the right question. Her question was the right question to ask, which is what is the science? And does the science support that? I think the science will tell you, and the doctors have told you, social distancing, any covering you can do would help. Do I think people need to be walking down Park Avenue when I take a walk at night with my kids to get them a little exercise. And we stay at least 6 feet away from people, and I don't see the need to wear masks on there. So, I got to be honest with you, Betsy. I'm not sure how it looks. I'm not sure what the will of the commission will be. I think that that's probably a overreach and a pretty drastic step to require people to wear masks in public. I just don't see the need for that.
Okay, and that really speaks to kind of asking this big question. What do you see the role of the commission in a crisis like this? What are the obligations under the law and within the framework of a federal, state, and county government? Obviously, we're starting to get early indications from Governor DeSantis that he is going to want to see this recovery or this reopening be, number one, phased, and number two, quite local. Do you have any plans yet for how Winter Park might either align with or maybe do things a little bit differently than the state or the county? And what do you think are the obligations of the commission to guide our city kind of through a process like this?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, a very fair question. I would say in general, the commission and the city has the opportunity to be more restrictive than the state or the county level. There's even some question as to whether or not we have to follow county guidelines, but we cannot be less restrictive. So I have been in touch with, as I said, I'm the chair of the Orange County Council of Mayors, and I've been in touch with other local mayors. And one of the discussion points has been, if we open up our areas of business and you don't. Now, we obviously have much different needs than Universal and Disney and some of those larger county-based operations. And so I can understand if they decide to hold those to a more restrictive protocol. But when we look at Orlando and we look at Maitland and maybe Edgewood or Eatonville or Apopka, you name some others, I think we all need to be in sync as to how we reopen. I think it creates some real challenges if we're not. So, how, when, what does it look like? I think it's going to be phased. I think it's going to be in lockstep with probably the local municipalities around us. I'm hopeful. We've worked really hard over the past couple of years to build relationships with them. They've been our biggest competitors and our biggest supporters. I call Dale McDonald, we speak to each other probably once a week and to determine how we can help one another. He'll also call me if we steal a business from him. But I think that's the way we can best get good governance for the region. And we're working with them, and hopefully it'll be more of a local decision. I will say, too, I know Governor DeSantis has caught a lot of flack, and I don't want to get into the politics of this because I think at every level there's been a lot of political nonsense that's been thrown about by whatever party. But I will say one of the things we ask as local leaders all the time is give us some freedom to govern locally, and he's been good for that. And some may criticize him for that, but at the same time, they're such a different state from county to county and from city to city. And I think he said to local leaders, you decide what's best for your local.
And I think that's an encouraging thing that I'm hearing out of Tallahassee on the calls I'm on every day, that this is going to be a phased and locally driven recovery. And this is almost not a fair question because I really don't think anybody has answers right now about what this looks like. But do you have a sense or maybe a gut feeling about what would reopen first, Mayor, if we were able to look at staging that recovery in Winter Park?
Yeah, I don't. I really don't, because again, we have some new commissioners and we have some commission members with with some different priorities right now. And it's very challenging to work as a cohesive group when you really haven't sat down to work as a cohesive group before. And I think there are some folks that need to understand some of the long-standing challenges that we face and maybe understand the directions that we've taken in the past to kind of inform the decisions we need to take in the future. So it's really challenging to tell you, Betsy. I wish I could say that we're in lockstep on how to open, but I think it's going to take a little bit more than that.
Well, I did say it was not a very fair question, so I just wanted to see if you knew something I didn't know, because I'm on endless calls and people keep saying, oh, we really don't have clarity on this yet. We really don't have clarity on this yet. I think we're going to get clarity on Thursday, maybe some clarity tomorrow, but I don't think we're quite there yet. I'd like to change the focus a little bit to this kind of climate, because we actually had our citywide election. We elected 2 new commissioners, Commissioner Sullivan and Commissioner DeCiccio, really in week 1 of what I would call Winter Park's version of the COVID-19 crisis. So it was interesting. We had an election in the middle of the crisis, and we swore in 2 new commissioners in the middle of the crisis. We had some interesting agenda items right away, including the overturn of the Orange Avenue overlay, which has now had 2 hearings to rescind. Can you speak a little bit about the new commission and some of the things that you all have been focused on, maybe both in COVID-19 realm and then outside of that realm? Because I know you all have looked at things outside of COVID-19 as well.
Boy, that's an interesting question. I think that when folks first get onto the commission, or when there's a change, and not even the new folks, just some other folks, there's been some pent-up demand from themselves and also from possibly some of their major supporters, that some pet projects get moved forward, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but some items that they may have been speaking about for a while. I will say I've been frustrated by the lack of adherence to kind of decades-old protocol on how things get moved forward, and so that's been a frustration for me. And I think everybody will tell you when you first get elected. Now, remember, you don't just represent 20 people, 200 people, 3,000 people that voted for you. You represent everybody, and I think it's important to understand that and to recognize that. And especially during this time when communication is extremely challenging for many, it may be difficult, and it may be, especially when you're coming out of a campaign where there's a lot of red meat thrown around, to perhaps sit down with someone who you may not have agreed with prior to, or perhaps you didn't truly understand what the issue was. I can tell you, sitting up there for, this will be 10 years on the commission, I've seen new commissioners come in. And when I was too, you thought you kind of had a really good grasp of what was being discussed at the time. I believe it was last year, Mr. Weaver, and again, no disrespect to Mr. Weaver, just using this as an example, he offered that for Winter Park to take over Duke Utility service area, which there's some service areas in our city. We could just go cut the Duke lines and tell them to come pick them up, and we could hook up Winter Park utility lines. Now that's paraphrasing a bit. Again, I don't mean to pick on Mr. Weaver. I'm just saying, I think there's a lot of understanding that goes in when you serve on the commission, and what you can and cannot do, and what has been done to date and why it has been done to date. So last night, there was a call for up to 5 workshops in the coming weeks. I don't think we had 5 workshops total last year outside of the OAO. So I think there's a desire to push some things through pretty quickly. Some things that are really staff level decisions, some things that are really staff level operations. And again, I think if we had the opportunity to sit in a room together, we could share that type of information rather than move some of these things forward as a commission. We need to make sure we're a policy setting organization and not a homeowners association. So I think that's one of the things we really need to make sure we stay in tune with.
So Mayor, let me give you a chance to get a drink of water. I'll ask you what's hopefully an easy question. I've noticed some hiccups with the whole virtual meeting platform. I know everyone's trying to do their best in the midst of what's a very challenging and unprecedented experience. Can you speak somewhat to your experience as mayor using the virtual meeting platform on GoToWebinar?
It's definitely challenging. I'm in the meeting. I usually have people walking through the chambers. So if you see me smile off camera, I'm usually smiling to somebody that's walking by from, any of the departments or the folks that I've gotten to know, and I have 2 or 3 people sitting in that room with me, trying to maintain a smooth smooth process is challenging sometimes. Keeping track of amendments, motions, it's been challenging. Our staff has done an absolutely amazing job at pulling stuff together on short notice. Running those meetings is interesting.
Do you feel like it's truly the same level of public engagement that we were able to have in a live meeting, or do you feel that something's getting lost in that translation?
Oh, yeah, I think things are getting lost. I think I don't believe this is the time to be doing workshops. I think that, as you know, I have a couple small businesses, and not only that, with family life, I've got 3 15-year-olds or 14-year-olds about to be 15 in the house. I'm in contact with other local elected officials trying to figure out how we move forward on things. I know that you all have lives and businesses to run, so putting more meetings together at this stage, I don't think is doing a service to the community, to be quite honest.
So let's talk a little bit about commission priorities going forward. I know last night you all talked about the backyard chicken program, and I think we've heard a few things about the library. We've heard a couple things about moving forward with acquiring post office land. Tell us a little bit about some of that and what stage some of those projects are in, if you would.
Well, there's been a push by a group who's been advocating for a backyard chicken program in the city for some time. I remember it came to us in 14 or 16. I don't recall exactly when. I was actually at the time the only commission member that saw or that voted to or that offered to keep the discussion moving. There was a lot of pushback in the community when it first came up, and that's why I'm a little disappointed right now is we're doing this and we don't have that ability to have the open forum. I don't think people are aware of it. And so that's a real big challenge for me. I think it's a pretty drastic program for some. And I think to their credit, a lot of the folks that are in this backyard chicken initiative will tell you that it's not as invasive as some people would have you believe, and that's great. But I do think there is some, it's certainly a change for Winter Park. I don't believe it's possibly part of our village atmosphere, as we like to talk about often, more of a rural kind of setup. So I think it should be held off until we can have public meetings and a little bit more public input. I really don't believe a lot of people know about it. The library, the library getting up from over today, and we're a little bit over budget on that. Our contingency is close to $900,000, the city's contingency. Again, I'm going to screw up the numbers a little bit, but I think our muck clearing was about $180,000 line item. We're at about $480,000 on it now, so it's about $300,000 increase. Now, keep in mind that's our contingency, and so our contingency really takes care of things like overages on desks and chairs and things we can cover. That's kind of where our limit is. The rest of the guaranteed maximum price is covered, and that's not our nickel if things don't go right. That's the team's nickel. So when you hear that, where I saw someone that told me that someone posted on Facebook that costs are skyrocketing. $300,000 on a $42 million budget is not really a skyrocket, I would offer, and as well, our contingency won't be skyrocketing. So we're moving forward. We had a request for a workshop on that to get closer to the details. I didn't see the need for it. We're having our Pizzuti rep, our owner's rep, brief us on that when they're available. We have staff managing it. That's a staff level responsibility. So, I guess they can come to the workshop and say this is where the numbers are, or they can just send us emails. So we don't see the need to have a more formal briefing on it. And then what was the third thing you mentioned, Beth?
Well, just what your priorities as you see them, because it feels to me like the will of the commission is to really handle a hearty diet of regular city business, not so much just focus on the COVID-19 pandemic and ensuing crisis. What would you bake into that model, Mayor, as priorities for you?
Oh gosh, reopening and how we're going to reopen. That's the most important thing to me right now. And there's nothing that we're doing, whether it's the backyard chicken initiative. And again, I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just mentioning items that are in front of the commission. The turning over of the OAO, what we do is a disposal of progress point property, possibly. What do you name any other thing? I don't think any of those, all of those combined, don't take precedent on how we reopen to our community, business and residential. I think that's going to be critical, and I think we should be focused on that. And the more meetings we have about items that are not critical right now are just doing a disservice to the community as a whole, because people cannot get involved. They just do not have the time with what's going on.
And then switching gears a little bit back to reopening, Mayor, are there any incentives that we haven't discussed that might be in place for business owners as we think about reopening? Anything focused on Park Avenue and beyond Park Avenue that comes to mind for you? As I said, we'll be surveying on this week so we can get a broad sample from across the community, but I didn't know if you, in your conversations, you had a sense of what a further incentive package might look like through either the CRA or the city's general funds.
There haven't been, Betsy. I think what we did was a preliminary, and to see how it went. Randy delivered us numbers last night, and he actually sent me an email today. I asked him to update this call, but I've been on calls up until this meeting, so I haven't looked at it. But we've had a pretty nice applications, pretty healthy application for our programs to the utility fund. But now we haven't really developed anything else. But I think, again, we can be pretty reactive if we have to do more. I'm really waiting to see what the governor, I've gotten some hints as to where he's going, but I'd like to wait until he comes out. These things can change. And even after he proposes it or after he shares it with us on Thursday, he can change it on Friday.
And speaking to, in another lane, our cultural entities, which is, we all know, our top priority for focus in Winter Park, they're really jewels in Winter Park's crown. Do you have any sense of how Winter Park can address their unique needs as we move forward into a reopening model?
Yeah, another challenge. I mean, I fairly enough, I think the restaurants are tending to get the most of the attention. And as I said, I understand that. I completely understand that. But a lot of the retail environments, a lot of the nonprofits, the museums, and the like are really kind of under the radar for many. And so even just keeping them top of mind is important. So when we do have a new normal, when there is a phase 1 or phase 1A or phase 2 or whatever the heck it is, I think it's important to go visit. Because I went for a run the other night, and even just stopping and letting the restaurateurs know we're thinking about them, just saying hi to them. I know that sounds really trite, but I do believe letting those folks know that they are in our thoughts, that we're trying to figure out the best way to open that. As I said, I know that doesn't sound all that helpful, but at the end of the day, we're still going to be restricted by some, I think, state guidelines when we do come through phase 1, and we'll just have to see what that looks like.
And Mayor, do you see any will to reimagine CRA funds and how they might be looked at differently in a go-forward basis as the crisis kind of carries on?
I think we have Hal George has spent a lot of time in this community, and he is the county representative to the CRA board. And I think he's got a real good sense, and he's not only has he served on CRA board, he serves on the Housing Authority board, he served on, I think, P&Z, I think he served on just a ton of boards. So I'm hopeful that with his experience and wisdom that he can bring possibly a different perspective to the CRA that is not existent or may not be existent yet on the city commission. I'm hopeful.
And as we think about phased reentry, I know you may be aware that the chamber led an initiative called Thrive Winter Park that brought business leaders together to create a common sense of purpose about helping to accelerate Winter Park's recovery. Do you imagine creating an aggressive economic growth plan or aligning with something from the independent sector like that? As you may know, through the funds raised in Thrive, we've already commissioned an economic study to help us set milestones and benchmarks for economic recovery, and to help businesses actually model the changes to their forecasting models and things like that. Do you see Winter Park collaborating on or leading an aggressive economic growth plan like that?
Oh boy. I would like to think so. I'm hopeful, but again, I kind of take a more optimistic perspective on some of this stuff. You and I have chatted in the past about the leadership that you all have taken from the business community, which I think is incredibly important. I'm waiting for that study to be finalized. Actually, I'd love to see the numbers that come out of that. And it's part art, part science, and so I think the trick is going to be in the art part of it, and how it gets implemented. You can bring the numbers to us all day long, but if we don't have some folks with some pretty creative minds, and it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm hopeful we have some artists. I know the science is going to back up some.
Okay, and I know we're going to open it up to questions, but just before we do, the mayor's a person too, and we would love to know how you've been spending your quarantine time. I'm terrified to think of being in a house with 3 14-year-olds and then all your other challenges as mayor, but can you share with us a little bit of the personal side about how you've been managing the quarantine?
I'm fortunate. I have an office that is about a mile from my house, so I come down here and work. As Caroline said to me, "Are you going to help with schoolwork with the kids?" And I said, I didn't like it the first time I went through it, so the second time might not be great. So she's working with the kids on that. I get home in the afternoons and when I'm not attending other meetings or virtual meetings. But we try to get out and exercise as much as we can, just to break up that boredom. As I said, we take really long walks, and at night we get some exercise. I'll lift in the gym or lift in the garage with the kids. Cooking a lot. I've never seen so much baking going on in my house. But we're spending a lot of time together doing some fun things. And, the downside of that is we all have some folks that are probably in some pretty compromised situations. And I hear stories, and I think we all have a story or two possibly to tell about that. But we're doing a lot of service work too in and around the community, which I think is important to keep that balance. So, spending a lot of family time together and actually enjoying a lot of it.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Amy, who's the absolute boss of everything that goes on Zoom, and we'll open it up to some questions if we've got a few audience questions that people want to have the mayor answer. Certainly, we feel very fortunate to have you with us today, Mayor Leary.
All right, so if you would like to ask a question of the mayor, you have a couple of options. You can, one, type it in the chat box, and I'll read that out to the mayor for him to answer. Additionally, you can use the Q&A icon on the bottom of your screen and place your question there. If you're on Facebook, you're welcome to type out your question in the comments, and we would be happy to read that out as well. Before we start, I will share that we do have a very positive Facebook comment that just says, "Thank you so much for letting us take a peek into what the local leaders are doing." So positive feedback coming in already, Mayor Leary. We so far have one question. So everyone else on the call, please be encouraged to ask your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Both of those options are on Zoom, and as I said, we'll also take a look for Facebook comments. So Mayor Leary, first kind of comment question is, can we talk a little bit more about what phase 1 opening might look like? I know it's a difficult question, but maybe just a little more dialogue around possibilities or any portions of that that you are able to address.
Yeah, a lot of it is, and I'm projecting here a bit, spacing, where we open some of the environments, some of the more public environments. It's going to be required spacing. It could require masks in certain spacing challenges. I think a lot of the larger critical businesses, the Home Depots and some of those have done a nice job of, and Publix have done a nice job of creating opportunities within their stores to distance on their own. I think there may be more of that that's going to be mandated. And as I said, we can, for the most part, we can be more restrictive, but we can't be less restrictive. So a lot of it we're going to find out on Thursday. Hopefully we'll be able to open more, and we will be able to, it may require half occupancy, 25% occupancy, but even that will depend upon the size and square footage of some of these places that we're talking about.
Thank you, Mayor Leary. And we have a couple of other comments and questions coming through. One is, do you have a guess to when the YMCA might open?
Oh boy. No is the fast answer to that. That is, and gyms, and unfortunately, that's a real challenge. Salons, people ask me about salons, people ask me about workout places. Boy, if people, I will say this, and while I feel bad for those fitness centers, that is one of the things that many of us can do on our own, and you can get out. I don't care whether you're rolling tires in your driveway, there's ways to try to take care of that. As for the salons, well, we've all gotten a little bushy and taken some bad haircuts from relatives, but I don't know when the YMCA is going to be open.
Well, thank you for trying to speak to that question to the best of your ability. I understand some of these questions are tough in the current environment. Here is a good question. I hope. What phase do you think the boat ramps would open? So I think this question is referring to President Trump's 3 phases. In your opinion, where do you think boat ramps would fit in?
So last evening during the commission discussion, there were 5 items that the city manager brought forward for consideration to reopen. One was a boat ramp. We had boat ramps, tennis center, because I think Maitland's Tennis Center continues to be open. We had the golf course, the Winter Park 9. We had the Winter Park Farmers Market. And I'm forgetting, and the boat, did I say boat ramps already? Boat ramps, Tennis Center, Winter Park 9. I don't know. So I'm hoping the only one that the commission could agree to was the golf course. I'm hoping boat ramps will be in phase 1 once we hear from the governor. I really think that it's going to be really tough. We're going to have to trust the folks to some degree. I don't believe the government should be that heavy-handed on it. If they're not being responsible, then we can always be more restrictive. But I'm hopeful. I think some of the folks that may be having some challenges or maybe health at risk will either wear masks or restrict their movement. But I do think that boat ramps should be in phase 1. I do believe the tennis could too, and the farmers market, if created properly and reimagined. We talked about doing it in the West Meadow. There's an opportunity there too. So hopefully phase 1 for boat ramps.
Great answer to that question. We have a comment from Cynthia at Mead Gardens that I'd like to read. She says, Mead Gardens has seen an increased and steady stream of visitors over the last few weeks. Thank you for allowing us to remain open for our community. There's lots of families and children visiting. So it's positive. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, the 5th item was the dog park. There's a lot of pent up demand. I support that. There's a pent up demand to open the dog park, and again, I think those folks, they deserve the opportunity to give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, again, we can come back in and close it down. But that was the 5th one.
Okay, great. Here's another comment and question. This person says they were listening to Mayor Deming's Economic Recovery Task Force, and they are discussing recommendations, of course. Does Winter Park set their own guidelines, or do they need to follow the county recommendations?
I think there will be a mix. There's some discussion and there's some disagreement on whether the county's executive orders can have to be implemented in Winter Park. I think it's wise to follow those guidelines. So I think we'll be looking at those decisions. I know some of the folks on that task force. I spoke to Mayor Dyer not too long ago about the makeup of the task force. He sits on the task force. So we'll be watching, we'll be listening, and it will probably impact and direct where we go forward with our phase 1 opening.
I'm sorry. Okay, I have a question that actually we received on another one of our webinars, and I'll pass this question on to you as well as it came up again. So in reference to the utility bill issue, was there any discussion about the commercial landlords passing their savings on to tenants? Let me know, does that make sense?
It does make sense. I believe in most instances the billing cycle is through the landlord or through the tenant. So it should be going right to the tenant. I believe that's how that's being handled.
Okay, great. And just a couple more questions for you. We have a question that's come through about COVID-19 testing. Is there any talk about doing more local testing, perhaps with coordinating with neighboring municipalities to bring testing to our neighborhoods?
Mr. Sullivan brought this up last night and asked if I would attempt to coordinate with my friends Eddie Cole, who's the mayor of Eatonville, and Mayor McDonald, who's the mayor of Maitland. And I certainly agreed that I would give those guys a call and see if we could look at possibly opening up a testing site. So I plan on doing that. I have not had an opportunity to do that today. But I will tell you, when speaking to Mayor Demings weeks ago, and he addressed the Orange County Council of Mayors probably a week ago now, setting up those facilities and staffing and having enough testing equipment, depending upon where the testing equipment is coming from, where the test kits are coming from. It's incredibly challenging. So they've really been focused, Orange County, on hotspots in the region. And if you look at where they're opening these sites and these mobile sites now, they're going to the hotspots. And our area is just not a hotspot right now. So I'm happy to have that discussion, and we can certainly look to see if the Mayor Demings is amenable to it. I think there's a lot of hope that we can just go in and ask and have them acquiesce and say, yeah, sure, we'll open one up. Unfortunately, it's just not the way things work. But I'll certainly ask the question in respect to Mr. Sullivan.
Great, thank you. And just one last question for you that came through from Facebook. In regards to individual contribution, what can we do right now or as soon as community members are able to help with the reopening of Winter Park?
Get out, shop. Even if you can't shop right now in the store, there as property owners, it's incumbent upon all of us to try to ask the public to get on the line, call people. You can order a book just as easily from Writer's Block Bookstore or from some of the other bookstores as you can from Amazon. Just give them a call. That business, keeping that local means so much. You can drive by and pick up dinner. You can make sure you stay in touch with all the other professional services that are provided in the city of Winter Park. Be active. We have a very active community, and so I really appreciate that all that you guys are doing to make sure that people are aware, but don't just sit home, and we're not. And again, it means so much to see people out and moving around, seeing that activity. It also shows a positiveness to it, showing the kids that we can get out, we can follow the rules, we can be social distance, and just stay active and show that our community hasn't locked up the doors and turned off the lights and gone to bed. I mean, there's a lot that can be done just by getting out and being active. So continue to just participate in the community, and whether that's online ordering, making phone calls and ordering, but just stay in touch and stay in tune and stay active.
Thank you, Mayor Leary, and thank you, audience, for your questions. Back to you, Betsy.
Amy, thank you. We really appreciate your moderating all the questions and keeping us on target here on Zoom. It's a great privilege to have Mayor Leary today. Mayor Leary, thank you for your friendship and your collaboration and being available to our audience today. As you know, this was also broadcast live over Facebook and will be on Facebook if anyone wants to share this content as well. It will also be parked on our website. If you go to winterpark.org to COVID Securing Your Business webinar series, it will be right there. So a look ahead, tomorrow is our virtual fashion show. We are really excited to offer spring fashions from Toonie, The Grove, Frank, Farema, and Siegel's Winter Park. We're going to hopefully be bringing the stores to you if you can't get to the stores, and letting you know about some of the things they're doing virtually to get us ready for Mother's Day and for maybe a reemergence into society where we could all wear some interesting clothes and get out and look our best. So we're excited about that tomorrow. That's at 4 p.m. And on Thursday, I know we got a couple questions about real estate viewings and the residential real estate market moving forward. We are going to hear from Jessica Kendrick, who's an attorney with the Kendrick Law Group, about how the pandemic has affected the current market for real estate and real estate closing. So we'll hope you'll be with us for Thursday. And then on Friday morning, we have Good Morning Winter Park. We're going to be hearing from Dan Marcone, who's a licensed mental health counselor and the owner of Seasons Counseling, who's going to be talking about building stress resilience during trying times. So that's going to be at 10 a.m. on Friday morning. That'll be a special bonus round for us. We hope that you will follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And then if you don't receive our newsletter, we are still doing a daily briefing every day with information about how to navigate the pandemic. And if you have the occasion to take the surveys that we're pushing out this week, it's very helpful to us in working with lawmakers about the best way forward. So please follow us at winterpark.org on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you again to my team. And thank you again, Mayor Leary. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thanks, Beth.